we have a special treat. We're going to read an excerpt from These Are the Voyages Season 2, the best book ever written on Star Trek. Scott Hansack's Hollywood. On June 26th, the Saturn Awards, author Marc Cushman, who wrote these books, will receive the Special Achievement Award from the Academy of Science Fiction and Horror. This is Marc Cushman right here. Come on down. Also, we have Larry Nemecek, Star Trek expert, writer of many Star Trek books, including Star Trek: The Next Generation Companion. Also, we have the star of Star Trek Continues, Mignogna. And I've said it once, I'll say it again, parted from me and never parted. Arlene Martel is in the house. From the Central book, and here you go.
He's going to read the memos from Gene Roddenberry and Bob Justman, and I think Stan Robertson from NBC. Arlene's going to be reading Dorothy Fontana's memos, Gene Coon's memos, and obviously the clutch pedals in between. Here we go. This is the story behind the story, script timeline. Gene Roddenberry, brainstorming with Gene Coon, hatched the idea of about time. Did you know that? Huh? The premise was then handed off to sci-fi novelist Theodore Sturgeon, coming off his first Star Trek writing job of shore leave. The second assignment for Sturgeon was meant to be part of the first season among the last episodes produced. On December 15, 1966, of Sturgeon's story outline, NBC's Stan Robertson wrote,
"This is a superior outline, and one which should add more to the in-depth audience appeal for Mr. Spock."
Robertson immediately saw the potential of this story to be among the best in the series, and from a broadcasting point of view, the most important. And that demanded to be given special attention. In Sturgeon's outline, Spock is observed acting strangely by many in the crew, far more than the film version. Robertson was instrumental in changing this, telling Gene Coon,
"I think we should minimize any attempts on the author's part of having Spock running around the ship, being engaged in various cameos with other members of the crew, to point out that there's something amiss with him. We've done this several times in other stories with Spock and various other members of the permanent crew, Kirk in The Enemy Within, Spock in Operation Annihilate, and everyone in Naked Time and This Side of Paradise. The point is that we can show Spock's condition by briefly playing it off McCoy and Kirk, who are more involved with him than others."
In Sturgeon's first day of the story, Kirk was skeptical over the news from McCoy that Spock's condition was serious, to the point of life and death. Stan Robertson wrote,
"I think Kirk's reaction to being told that he must get Spock to the planet Vulcan as soon as possible or Spock will die is not keeping with the warm characterization of our starship captain. We realize he must consider what's best for the entire spaceship, but he, more than anyone aboard, knows Spock is closer to him. So it seems his reactions would be a little different than outlined here."
Wanting to see more of Vulcan than the outline depicted, and more Vulcans than just the one girl Spock was to marry, Stan Robertson warned,
"The planet Vulcan and those who inhabit it have been built as such a mystery throughout our series that unless we establish more of the planet than is outlined here, and unless we show some other Vulcans other than the girl, we will indeed be cheating our viewers."
The monarch to Paul would be added, as would Ston and numerous others in the marriage procession. Robertson felt Kirk needed a better reason to fight Spock than the original treatment indicated, where he only engaged in combat because he was chosen, and the Vulcan law demanded his involvement. Robertson suggested that Kirk proceed, quote, perhaps with the idea that it would save Spock's life, end quote. Added into the script, Kirk's line to McCoy,
"You said this fight might save his life, so I'll give it to him. What's a black eye against that? Besides, that's T'Pau, Vulcan over there. All Vulcan in one package. Do you think I can back down in front of her?"
Robertson also wanted better clarification as to why Spock would die if not return to Vulcan. This led to the chilling comparison to salmon swimming upstream. With these notes in hand, Sturgeon was sent home to write a script. Dorothy Fontana said,
"I must say, it took a lot of time to get out of Ted Sturgeon, who wasn't really used to television pace. He was used to writing his short stories and his novels at his own speed."
It was now clear that this was going to be a second season episode. Regardless, 3 months after Sturgeon had started the script, Roddenberry sent word to the writer's agent.
We must get our first draft from Ted Sturgeon sooner. Regrettably, cut him off and assign the project to another writer. Where is he? How is he? What is he doing?
Sturgeon relented and sent in what he had on paper so far. Robert Justman was quick to respond, writing to Roddenberry.
I've read the first 2 acts of Amok Time as submitted by Ted Sturgeon on March 29, 1967. I find it hard to receive only 2 acts of this epic. Is it because we will receive the next 2 acts next season?
That's Bob Justman. Pete Sloman of DeForest Research, who read all the Star Trek scripts along with Joan Pierce for technical accuracy, was accustomed to the hurry up and wait drill whenever the theater surgeon was put on assignment. He said,
Sturgeon was very famous for turning in scripts anywhere between 2 days and 2 weeks after the due date, the shoot date, because he just couldn't get it done in time.
and this meant that shoot dates had to be constantly pushed back. It had happened with Shortly, it was happening now with About Time. It would happen again with further stories and script assignments given to Sturgeon. Stories and scripts that would never find their way in front of the camera due to the writer's tardiness. More pressure was put on Sturgeon. The balance of the script was delivered a few days later. Robert Justman and Dorothy Fontana each had to say about the first draft script, which, coming from Ted Sturgeon, as with Shortly, was an imaginative but loosely structured tale. In a 7-page memo to Roddenberry, Robert Justman said,
"Naturally, I'm very pleased with the concept of this script, so therefore, enough of praise and let me get on with the areas I'd like to have fixed. At times in the story, we tend to get very cute and precious. We should not get so cute and precious that people start laughing at us rather than with us."
Roddenberry, a firm believer in keeping Star Trek serious and as far away as possible from the campiness of Lost in Space, agreed. Sturgeon was instructed to be less cute and less precious. Fontana, with her 4-page memo to Roddenberry, took issue with the character Sturgeon had invented, Maggie, a young female crew member smitten with Mr. Spock. DC wrote,
"We should eliminate the whole Maggie in love bit. If you really insist on having some female sick at heart over Spock's marriage, well, why not just pick up the naked time relationship of Christine Chapel in love with Spock? Or Christine, at least, is a mature woman we have met before, and we know her. And some drippy-eyed kid you don't care about." Needless to say, any replacement of Maggie by Christine would also require a different approach to the character and her feelings for Spock on a much more adult level.
Maggie was taken out, and Christine Chapel was put in. Regarding further changes, Bob Justman was an instigator of a couple excellent scenes. He told Roddenberry,
I think one of the weaknesses of this script is that we do a lot of talking about how Mr. Spock is suffering, but we are never alone with him to actually see him attempting to control himself.
the scenes eventually to be added included a tormented Spock staring hypnotically at the computer monitor, studying the picture of a female Vulcan child to bring H7, and later smashing the same monitor with his fist when he heard calls from the bridge. Regarding the arrival of the marriage party of Vulcan, DC Fontana wrote,
"We're cheating the audience when we indicate a Vulcan flying machine by sound alone. I do not suggest we make a Vulcan flying machine. I suggest we have to bring arrive on foot, or by travois, or dog sled, or a howdah, or anything but a flying machine we can't show an audience."
Justman echoed this, writing,
I suggest that the welcoming committee should arrive by some other means. Would you believe walking?
Roddenberry and Kuhn opted for a sedan carried by a couple of muscular Vulcan males. Neither Justman nor Fontana thought much of Sturgeon's invention of the Vulcan language, or the many instances of its use, including numerous pages of Vulcans talking to Vulcans in Vulcan. Fontana begged Roddenberry,
"Please eliminate all the Vulcan dialogue and keep it in English. Saves translation and will keep everyone informed of which player is where. Also, I anticipate the biggest laugh of the year in scene 58 when T'Pring utters some kind of large Vulcan pronouncement and Spock stares back at her saying, 'T'Pring? Clark?'"
Justman referred to Sturgeon's Vulcan speak as mumble jumble and told Gene Roddenberry,
I think for the purpose of our viewing audience, all conversation should be in English. However, we can space the Vulcan speeches with various esoteric words from time to time, which should add sufficient flavor. By the way, I like the language that Our Lady from New Orleans invented in the script, Shondakai. It sounded and read like a real language, as opposed to the words contained within this script.
The lady from New Orleans was Darlene Hartman, who has submitted unsolicited stories and even a full spec script to Star Trek. Roddenberry could have taken a liking to Hartman, who would one day blossom into a successful and well-regarded science fiction author, and they would soon put her on an assignment for a script called Shoal. As for Spock's competitor for the hand of T'Pring, later to be named Ston, Sturgeon, he sees what's coming. Sturgeon had come up with the name that amused Justman, who wrote Roddenberry.
I think the writer has made a Freudian slip in naming Spock's rival. Spore is an interesting name. It has a certain built-in connotation. How about renaming him Sperm?
Funny sequences to bring spins around again and again before pointing out her challenger to Spock's marriage rights. Of this, Justman wrote,
"We're missing a good bit when Spock's lady friend chooses his opponent. First of all, she should hesitate and lead the audience to believe that she's going to select that great big Mr. Spore to fight with Mr. Spock. But then, at the last minute, she should turn and indicate Captain Kirk. After all, if you're going to set up the character of Spore, we ought to do something with it." I didn't even say the name without laughing. Sorry. At least we ought to do something more than we're presently having in this version of the script. And anyhow, I fall down and laugh every time we spin Spock's girlfriend around like a gyroscope.
I would have liked to have seen Arlene have to do that. Dorothy Fontana was falling down too, but not necessarily laughing. She said,
"Can we have another way for T'Pring to pick her champion rather than spinning around like a dervish and stopping to point at Kirk?"
Regarding Sturgeon's wish that there be a viewing audience to witness the fight, Robert Justman wrote,
"Why raise the point of the whole world watching this Mortal Kombat if we never show the whole world watching this Mortal Kombat? Why don't we just not refer to it and stay out of trouble? This will save our establishing a certain similarity between this show and the script that John Chernobyl is writing, Red Circuses, which, among other things, lampooned network television."
Fontana responded similarly, writing,
"There are references here and earlier to a whole world watching. Is this on a candid camera? I don't know if we would like a whole world which intrudes on what is basically a personal ceremony. Do they also watch the spawning? I'll bet they don't have NBC broadcast standards to contend with."
The reference was removed. Regarding the climatic fight scene, Dorothy Fontana wrote,
"Leonard Nimoy will kill himself if he must do scene 62 in which he behaves like a snorting bull. I strongly recommend an examination of the dialogue and characters here."
In his memo, Bob Justman said,
"Spock starts acting like King Kong. I believe that this is the wrong way for Mr. Spock to behave. I think that we should still attempt to play the fact that he's barely keeping himself under control, but he shouldn't snort and beat himself on the chest and exclaim loudly, 'Kiki me Clark.'"
The snorting and beating was replaced with,
Spock looks toward Kirk, and there's absolutely no sign of recognition in his eyes. He scowls.
the Kiki Clark was replaced by something less likely across stickers, Cleve Foff. The staff notes were on Roddenberry's desk. Now what to say to Sturgeon? The last time Roddenberry sent rewrite instructions to Theodore Sturgeon regarding the first round of shore leave, Sturgeon responded with a letter filled with hurt and anger. So Roddenberry chose a different tack this time. He gave the task to Gene Kuhn. Gene Kuhn's letter to Sturgeon was somewhat short for Gene Kuhn.
First of all, Ted, let me say that we're all generally pleased with the first draft of Amok Time. Although, of course, certain amount of polishing and so on will be necessary.
A certain amount of polishing translated to a great deal of rewriting. Coombs' memo continued.
We have to learn why Spock will die if he doesn't go to Vulcan in 8 days. What kills him? Swollen gonads? And since we have established that Spock either gets to Vulcan within 8 days or dies, why doesn't he do so when he doesn't get married? Or late? We must establish a sound explanation and have it explained, or a lot of people will be unhappy with us. I met with some resentment on the name Spore from Bob Justin. He thinks it might be slightly suggestive. I know, Ted, you have gone to a great deal of trouble to invent the Vulcan language, but people just don't dig invented languages, and actors never seem to be able to sell them. If the entire world is watching their ceremony, we get the feeling it's much like when a young couple gets married on Earth today. Then the groom takes the bride to bed on the Tonight Show. I would much prefer not to see Spock do a bad imitation of King Kong by striking himself on the chest and snorting. We play Spock as being unemotional when he sincerely thinks that he has killed his captain. For heaven's sake, at this point, let him register some honest surprise, some reaction, some overt human emotion. And let him not be ashamed of it.
Among the many critiques, Coombs did as D.C. Fontana had hoped and told Sturgeon to replace the far too young and far too annoying lovesick crew girl, Maggie, with the older, more palatable lovesick Nurse Chapel. Theodore Sturgeon did not respond with an angry letter, but after 2 weeks of silence, by sending in his second draft teleplay, Roddenberry told Coombs that he liked the script generally, saying,
Ted's writing has a vitality which is good for the show. He's beginning to understand our format, and he understands our characters, and should do increasingly better scripts, provided we see he's always launched off with a good, sound story. It seems to me the more action and jeopardies in the story, the less inclined he will be to make the script talky.
But Roddenberry also had issues. He took notice that Spock was now more often talked about than seen, and he told Gene Coombs.
If you wrote the scenes with Spock in them, Ted would be forced to feel along with Spock, and that would hurt. And it is much less painful to keep it at a distance. Talk about it rather than feel it. Sure, it hurts to be a Vulcan coming into heat. But the writer has to feel that hurt in order to write it. And the audience is going to have to feel it, or we won't have a teleplay which takes advantage of everything inherent in the story.
Finally, after 8 pages of this memo of concerns and complaints, Roddenberry warned Coombs.
This is a critical script for Star Trek. There should be no doubt in anyone's mind that the Spock characterization has caught the public's fancy. Carelessness now may see that character and characterization irreparably damaged. This must be one of our best and most carefully thought out scripts of the year. If there's any doubt about this, I would much rather see this episode shot in a month or 2 from now, replaced with something less important, which we can quickly hammer into shape. Let's not rush this one.
The script was not sent back to Theodore Sturgeon for further work, but instead handed off to Dorothy Fontana. Her rewrite, the yellow-covered first draft, was the first version to be distributed to the cast. Fontana later said,
Mostly, again, it was pulling together things that were not Star Trek and making them Star Trek. There was some glitches, like the first scene as I wrote it. You see Nurse Chapel going into Spock's quarters, and she has the soup, and then she comes out screaming, and the soup comes flying out after her. The way Ted originally wrote that scene was that Chapel comes to Kirk and says in a sentence, "You should see what just happened, what Spock did. You can't do that. You have to show it. You can't say, you should have seen it. Yes, you should have seen it." And then with the so-called love story, the bride and the man she really wants, I put in the fact that she was very calculating, saying, "You'll be gone. I'll still be here, and Stan will be here." Like the Julie Newmar character in Friday's Child, but Gene didn't allow it there, so I brought some of that into this one. And the characters needed to be more clearly defined and motivated, and since I had become the resident Vulcan expert, I got that task. But delving into the Vulcan culture that nobody had ever seen before, the ceremony, the formality, this woman who was head of the council to cow, that was all basically Sturgeon, but we made it more Star Trek.
Pleased with Fontana's rewrite, Leonard Nimoy wrote to Roddenberry,
I just finished reading Amok, and I'm very, very happy with it. I think that the story very successfully involves all our central characters in strong and meaningful relationships. There's a strong line of suspense and emotional contact throughout the script.
but Nimoy didn't appreciate showing an emotional experience with Kirk at the conclusion of the story, especially since it was to be played in front of McCoy and Nurse Chapel. Recalling his suggestion from the Naked Time, he wrote,
I think that Spock would go off and do that by himself.
in that earlier episode, Nimoy's recommendation was dead on, leading to the excellent scene in which Spock had his breakdown alone in the briefing room. Here, however, the writers, Sturgeon and Fontana, had the better idea. Audience reaction regarding the highly emotional scene has long since proved them right. Nimoy concluded his letter,
All in all, a very gratifying script to read, and I'm looking forward with great pleasure to shooting.
Robert Justman and director Joseph Petty felt there was still more work to do. Justman wrote to Gene Coon,
The teleplay swings along like gangbusters for the first 3 acts, but I'm sad to state that, in my opinion, it falls down badly in the last act. I feel I have to agree with Joe Petty that the 4th act needs straightening out, to a great extent. I say, Krika to Act 4.
Gene Coon had his turn with the script, and especially Act 4. His version was the final draft dated May 31st. Gene Roddenberry left his imprint on the script as well for a revised final draft dated June 1st. Coon got it back for his second revised final draft from June 5th, plus 2 additional sets of page revisions from June 7 and 8. Finally, all were satisfied. They had to be, because production was to begin the next day. Is what they did every week. That's what it took to write a Star Trek script. And that's why they're still fun to watch 45 years later. No other TV shows put that much work into a script. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone.